There, you should now all be able to see some pretty cats. I was going to say some prettier than others, but they're all pretty. Yeah, welcome. Those of you who weren't in Harrogate for the wildlife show last year, and I don't think any of you were, I have practiced this talk before, but I've added a few little extras in. So we'll see how we go. The very first thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to thank you for answering our little survey that I sent round, I think, about 10 days ago, asking you what your attitudes to travel were. And here is a pretty summary of your responses. And there were two questions, you might remember, those of you who answered it, saying, and I think quite understandable answers. When do you think you'll feel comfortable traveling? Well, I said to Latin America, but I guess it's wider than that, isn't it? Just under half said next year. Very few said this year. I haven't heard from any of them subsequently, though, of course, I know some of you are due to go around Christmas, as am I, which I'm looking forward to. And then probably more usefully for our office, I asked when you think you might start planning that trip. And most of you, again, said early next year. Well, obviously, that's not going to change while the government has its quite, what should we say, challenging travel restrictions in place. And by the way, the 9.3% of you who said you might start planning over this summer, I haven't heard from yet. There you are. There's our survey results. Now cats. There are some iconic cats in Latin America, and I am going to speak mostly about the two perhaps most iconic, the puma and the jaguar. But there are a lot more than that, of the smaller variety. And as it says on that slide, they're all under some sort of danger, some better than others. But I just thought most of them are in the threatened or near threatened category, and you'll see as we go along. I'm going to start with the small ones and get larger. These are the really smallest, almost the size of domestic cats, with quite large ranges. The Pampas cat, probably one of the smaller ranges, that's mainly Uruguay and Argentina. It's very, very rarely seen. The Andean cat is endangered, that is the most endangered of the cats on this page. And that is about the only rather blurry picture I could find. The oncilla is like a sort of small ocelot. Those are seen reasonably often, particularly in Colombia, forest dwellers. And I was going to say that Jeffroy's cat is rarely seen. But I was talking to one of the hotels we work with in Torres del Paine, that I'll mention later, called Awasi, where they put up a camera trap. And it so happened that they have fairly regular sightings of a Jeffroy's cat in Patagonia. So they are there, they're just all really secretive. And very little is known about any of them, to be honest, the small ones. Going up slightly in scale, three more for you. The jaguarundi is unusual because it is a diurnal cat. Despite its dark color, it mainly hunts by day. The margay is definitely nocturnal. You can tell, can't you, from its beautiful big eyes, and has quite a large range. And then the largest of the little cats is the ocelot. which are also really beautiful. So they're probably up to about 25 kilos, something like that. When I worked in Venezuela as a cowboy in my youth, we had a couple of ocelots in captivity because their mother had been hunted by, I can't remember now, by a neighbor or one of the cowboys, sadly, and killed. And the two cubs were then orphaned. And so we adopted them. Beautiful little things. And until we had to start feeding them more and more capybara meat to keep them going. And on one occasion, when my boss had gone off for holiday, and I was in charge of the farm, we were farming, they both escaped. They killed all his chickens, 3 of his dogs, just like that, natural born killers. So we took them off to a far corner of the farm and quietly let them go. We hadn't let them go before because we thought they wouldn't survive in the wild, but after that destruction, we assumed they would. Anyway, that was an ocelot. Now, the puma. These are beautiful cats. They're usually a single yellowy color. They generally have a thick coat. And if you look at that range map on the left-hand part of the screen, you can see they've got a large range. They are mainly adapted for cold, as you can see, but that doesn't mean, we had those in Venezuela as well. They were called mountain lions there, but it's the same animal. And they certainly used to range all the way up into North America as well, where they're known as the cougar, or I think mountain lion as well. So they're really clever. They're very adaptive. They're found in cities. I think they live in Los Angeles. They adapt. They're clever cats, and they get up to about 80 kilos. Those two there, those beautiful, they're sisters actually, were photographed in Torres del Paine in southern Chile, and they are mainly solitary, we think. Although that was what people thought, but now with a lot of observation going on in Torres del Paine, there are definite family groups doing things together. All these pictures are Torres del Paine pumas, and this book is a rather marvelous account by this chap, George Chayworth Musters, of his 2 years spent living with the Tehuelche Indians in southern Patagonia in about 1870. The Tehuelche survived. They were nomadic hunters. They hunted the local ostrich, the rhea, and the guanaco, the little llama-like camelid. And they invented the bolas, those leather, stone covered with leather that you swing around your head on actually an ostrich sinew, is what it was originally made from. And so there are some illustrations from his book of firstly the hunting going on. They lit fires to panic the ostrich, and also, I don't know if you can see it on your screen because the pictures of you are obscuring. There is a puma on the front cover of his book, I'm afraid being clubbed. And they had a reputation for timidness, the puma, and were killed fairly frequently, I'm sure, by the Tehuelche. And probably Musters. I've got a little quote from him later. That was his rather incredible route. He started down in a place called Sandy Point, then, now known as Punta Arenas, down in southern Chile, and traveled with a Tehuelche, various Tehuelches that he befriended, right up across what was then very unmapped Patagonia, and ended up just north of the Valdez Peninsula. These are the same two sisters, pumas in Torres del Paine. They're well known because one of them, as you can see, hasn't got a tail. And there is their principal prey, the guanaco, and there's no shortage of them. I would say Torres del Paine, the puma, not reintroduction, but the puma protection program is really being very successful. There's a nice stable population there, and they've got plenty of isolated mountains they can be in without us getting in their way. And even the local farmers are realizing their worth because people come and want to see the pumas. There you are. If you ever do need to get offered a bit of puma, masters will tell you that it's better boiled than roasted. And he says to kill a puma with a gun is rather a difficult matter. I don't think he's talking from a moral perspective. And that is a rather beautiful shot that this chap, Jorge Casanave, sent me. We used it on a Christmas card one year of a puma in Torres del Paine National Park. Now, moving on to the jaguar, the largest cat in the Americas, the third largest in the world after the tiger and the lion, and the only member of the Panthera family now in the Americas. Tigers, lions, and leopards are all members of the Panthera family, and snow leopards as well. They're much heavier, officially 160 kilos, but I'm sure in the jungles of Venezuela we heard of heavier ones than that. Again, a large range, not as large as the puma, but I'm going to show you a picture of its range in a minute. One of the things about Panthera is they have a very distinctive jaw structure, and therefore are able to roar, and apparently that is unique to them, and something to do with the design of their larynx. They used to range across North America as well, but they're no longer found in North America. They went extinct there about 50 years ago. And they're genetically very similar across all of their range. So are generally considered the same species, by which most people, I think, mean they can interbreed. They have very strong jaws in relation to their prey. And that's probably because when they were evolving, their prey was a lot bigger. A lot of their prey would have been Pleistocene megafauna that no longer exists, that went extinct itself in the last ice age about 10,000 years ago. These enormous sort of things with a hard, there was a giant anteater, there was all sorts of giant animals, and it probably developed this really strong jaw to cope with them. But when we Europeans very conveniently introduced extra prey for them in cattle, sheep, all these horses, very conveniently, they found their strong jaw was still useful. It's a really comfortable in water. It's got big claws, so it can swim, it can fish, I'll show you a picture of one in a minute, of a really dark coloured one. So the jaguar can be almost black. Okay, I'm not quite sure why I've put two maps showing the same thing, but if you look at the left-hand one, you can see traditionally the range, the grey area, the range was pretty much all of South America, keeping to the lowlands, not so much the mountains. But now it is restricted more to the forested areas, the Amazon, anywhere where it can get good cover, but still get plenty of prey. Not just the Amazon, Pantanal, and I'll go on to a few other specific countries later. Some reasons for that decline, a loss of habitat is number one, but hunting cannot be, was also really significant. They reckon today's population is around 64,000. In 1850, 4,000, even in 1850, 4,000 a year were being killed for their fur, for their hide. And in 1960, records in just Brazil were showing 15,000 a year being killed. So it's really lucky there are any left at all, I think. Luckily for the jaguar, in 1973, they were added to the CITES, the endangered list, and that effectively banned, stopped international trade in their skins, and that has definitely saved them. There's a melanistic black jaguar on a marvelous beast. You can see that could be mistaken for a black panther or something. And this rather incredible picture that I was sent by a friend in Brazil, it demonstrates the strength of that jaw. That is a jaguar biting clean through the head of a full-size caiman alligator in the Brazilian Pantanal. And they are, caiman are a major prey of jaguars in that part of the world. They're really clever animals, and a bit like other intelligent animals like killer whales. Different family groups will evolve different strategies for prey. I haven't got any pictures on this presentation, but I was talking to a chap called Gustavo who runs a lovely little lodge upstream, about an hour's flight upstream from Manaus on the Amazon. And they have a jaguar population who live on the Amazon there, a place called Tefé. Now, what's unique about the Amazon at that point is it inundates. In the wet season, the water goes up by 15 meters. And so there's no dry land. And the jaguars there have adapted to live in the canopy during the wet season, which is several months long, and survive just by fishing. So it's incredible, isn't it? Quick snapshot of some of the prey. There's a Venezuelan capybara. They are definitely on the menu. As I say, they can even go fishing, though I guess they'll probably try and keep their paws out of the way of a piranha's jaw, because if any of you who fish them know, they are as sharp as a razor blade. Tapir, any small mammal, squirrel monkeys, and even a sloth would all be on the menu of the jaguar. And one of the threats to the jaguar, or one of the main threats, has of course always been man. This rather lovely picture was taken about 40 years ago by a friend of mine in Venezuela, who also took a picture of that traditional jaguar hunting spear. Most of them had a crosspiece on the haft in case the jaguar, to stop the jaguar getting you as it leapt at you. But you were known as el hombre completo, the complete man, if you could single-handedly kill a jaguar with a spear, and also tie up a wild, probably bull actually, from horseback, just get it tied up to a tree again with no one helping you. That was the sort of mark of the man 40 or 50 years ago in the plains of Venezuela and any of those cattle ranching places. The Pantanal would have had similar traditions. Thankfully now that is no more. and all these animals are protected. And just as a sign of how things have changed, the photograph top left is a friend of mine in Venezuela, and that again, that photograph is probably 30 years old. And that jaguar there had been, probably rather like the ocelots we had been raised from a cub, and probably, rather sadly, had its claws removed too. But the other two photographs, one of which, the one on the right, Sue took literally a few months ago in the Brazilian Pantanal. And as you can see, that jaguar has a collar on it. It's being studied. It's protected, and it's teaching us an awful lot about their habits. The conservation effort for jaguars is a challenge. They need about 25 square kilometers each to survive. So you need to have large areas, and then to maintain genetic diversity, you need communication between however many areas you're protecting. And this slide was sent to me by an organization called Panthera. And if you look it up, I think it's panthera.org on the internet. And they are doing fantastic work with jaguar conservation, but this is their vision, to produce that red area, which is a corridor linking all the jaguar populations in Latin America and Central America. Some areas of that project are going to be far more challenging than others, mainly because of human presence. But it's a wonderful project, and I really hope they make a success of it. So now that was the basics on the cats. I just thought I'd move on and quickly talk about a few places where you might see them. This is southern, well, it's actually Argentine Patagonia, the Fitzroy National Park, but it's just the other side of the border from Torres del Paine, and certainly this is all puma country. Puma, so I'd say if you want to go and see a puma, go to Torres del Paine. I'll tell you about that in a minute. For the jaguar, there are various, a few years ago, it wouldn't have been possible to even semi-guarantee a sighting, but it is now getting, success rates are getting higher. This is in the Brazilian Pantanal, the swamplands, again, that's inundated about half the year, but always has some dry land. And this is a project called On Safari. Onça in Portuguese means jaguar, hence the name. And this is a farm called Cayman, where its current owner, who's ex-racing driver called Mario Harborfield, his other passion apart from Formula One has always been wildlife. And with some friends, he's set up some great projects. They're working with jaguars. They're also working with the maned wolf, which is a pretty unusual animal also found in this area. So they've got tracking programs. They're monitoring them on safari. And quite interesting to look at that graph top right, where you can see that there are sightings pretty much any month of the year, but it looked in 2018 as if going between June and November would give you your best chance. The macaw there, I've just put in a picture because that's another project they run. That's the hyacinth macaw, the bird with the strongest jaw of any bird, as my mother-in-law can attest, having been bitten by one. So Mario's place at Cayman, really comfortable. You can see a little swimming pool down there, top end, quite expensive. Not the only way to see a jaguar. The famous Transpantanera Road, top right, crosses the Pantanal. Well, it doesn't cross it, it goes into it, and then it stopped. The Fazenda Joffre Velho on the left there was actually bought by people from the Panthera organization as their base to study, and they take in school groups studying jaguars. So that's a much more basic place you can stay and see them. Up until perhaps last year, the most guaranteed way to see a jaguar was to go on a boat, and because you often see them along the riverbanks. And there are several boats that run from a place called Porto Joffre, which is just in the Pantanal. Now, on the puma side, as I said, Torres del Paine has every year more and more people are getting involved with puma conservation, so it's fantastic. I thought I would just give the Iwasi Foundation a shout because they were one of the first, and they're on a sort of quiet side of Torres del Paine. It's an area the pumas love to be in, and they've got some great projects, and also educating the local farmers, which of course is so much part of it. Mainly getting them to move from sheep, which are prey to the puma, to cattle, which the puma don't eat so much. And I know, David, you're on this call somewhere, so you'll recognise that picture of me and a horse last year in Torres del Paine. I took a little group down there, and I made them go down there after the solar eclipse, and because I wanted to see a puma. And we stayed at that wonderful hotel, the Explorer, on the left there at the bottom, but there are plenty of other options. Of all of the group, I think I was probably the only one who didn't see a puma. So there you go. Anyway, pumas, I would say Torres del Paine. Other countries for cats, and probably jaguars mainly. Belize really was where most of the conservation projects started, in the Coxcomb Basin there. The only photograph I could find from Belize was that crab that is meant to look rather like a jaguar. So really quite difficult to see in practice. They're there, but difficult to see in practice. And I would say the same for Guatemala. The picture bottom left is taken in Guatemala. Guyana, however, you've got a reasonable chance of seeing one. They've got probably the best primary rainforest in the world, certainly in the Americas, in Guyana, and all the rest of the pictures are taken there. That's a harpy eagle, top center, and a jaguar just walking through one of the roads that goes through the forest, the Iwakurama Reserve in Guyana. So not guaranteed at all, but quite a good chance. Peru is another country where it's quite good to see them, quite a good chance. I just put in this quote from clients of ours. I can't remember who sent us that. Maybe you're in the audience now, but I couldn't believe it when I read it. I saw so many things. Jaguar, puma, 8 types of monkey. That was all staying in a place called the Tambopata Research Centre, where Sue and a group from Oxford were meant to be almost at this very moment, but sadly have been COVIDed, or whatever we call it. So that one's been rescheduled to May next year, and I know about 3 of the people on this call are on that trip. So good luck, and I'm expecting lots of photos when you get back, please, of all those animals. The tall leader, I just put a picture of him bottom right because he is Mr. Cuckoo, Nick Davies. He's such an engaging guy. If you too are desperate to go with our Oxford and Cambridge group to the Amazon, we'll have a quiet word and we'll see what we can do. And that was pretty much, I think my timing is quite good. I said about half an hour. There we are. Hopefully you've all seen our brochure, which had a jaguar in it, which again was photographed in the Pantanal by a client of ours some years ago, called Mike Lane. In those days, you had to work a lot harder. Mike took 2 trips, as far as I remember, in about 6 weeks to take that photograph. So thank you very much. Now let me just visit the chat if I can. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to ask you in a minute for ideas for future talks. But let me just stop doing that. Have a look at the chat and see. Oh, look, you haven't asked me enough questions. Oh, good. Yeah, well, I'm glad I said the right thing to you, Sophie. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. If any of you have got any specific questions, do fire away. Feel free to unmute yourself and say something, or type it into the chat. Oh gosh, do jaguars ever eat people? See? I bet they have. I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I'm sure I've never heard of a jaguar eating a person, and even pumas, which are particularly, which are more numerous, very timid. I've never heard of them either. Certainly not clients. Thank you. You're all safe with Last Frontiers. But do, if you enjoyed this little quick talk, do give me ideas for future ones, and I'll see what I can come up with, maybe in a few weeks' time. Now, Sue has asked, do you need to take any precautions? Sue, do you mean precautions against cats or precautions against anything else? My only precaution against a cat would be make sure I've got my camera out.
Sorry, yes, my finger slipped and I pressed send before I finished the sentence. I was really thinking about insects and things, and because these sort of jungly sort of areas, you know, it's a bit dicey, I should think, in places.
Yeah, certainly if you're looking for jaguars, you're likely to be in the tropics or the subtropics, where in the evening the mosquitoes can be a bit annoying. DEET is normally good enough, and it is normally just the evening. So as long as you haven't got any plastic watches which DEET eats away, you should be fine.
Thank you.
And Doug Helsby says he has a video of jaguar catching caiman. Well, send it to me, Doug, and I'll broadcast it next time. How about that?
Can't see the key on tell. I'd like to see another screen. Have we got one?
Great. Well, thank you all very much. I think I'm going to draw it to a close there. But as I say, please do send me suggestions, because it's nice to have something to I mean, I love cats, so that was easy. But
Yeah, they come. It comes then.
Do think of some suggestions, and I'll do my research and reach out to a few contacts and see what unusual stories I can come up with. So thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good job. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Exit.
Well done. Yeah. We didn't make our sound. Let's come on a bit. Very good.